All right, Chloe, thank you so much for joining this panel. This is the Rise from the Ashes panel. This is a panel to promote Rise from the Ashes, which is a course. It's about 3 hours of material, all about toxic work environments. So I kind of look at that as like a nasty breakup. What do you think? Leaving a toxic work environment, is it similar to leaving a toxic relationship?
Absolutely.
Great.
Like,
I'm glad that we're
big
on the
thing.
same I'm glad we're on the same page. And really honestly, it's a kind of like I like to talk about this. My name's Kenzie Dolan. I'm a certified professional astrologer, and I'm very gravitated toward talking about death, whether that's physical death or a psychological death. And when we leave a toxic work environment or a toxic relationship, it is a death of some sort. It's psychological where you do need to like rebuild yourself. So this is what the course helps people do. Chloe, please introduce yourself. You've had a career portfolio, have done a lot, and it's Women's Empowerment Month. And I feel like for the average woman in her 30s, you've done a lot. So I want to applaud you for that. But please introduce yourself. Tell us where you're coming from and what you're doing right now.
Cool. So I'm Chloe Drimal. I live in New York City. I am the founder and CEO of Sol Mindfulness, which is an app that empowers women to be their truest form of self through storytelling circles. So, storytelling circles are hour-long guided video experiences with up to 6 other women where you meet one another. You're led through meditation that helps you find a story of your past around a topic. You share that story, you listen to others, and it ends in reflections. And through this act of storytelling circles, you're able to really understand the patterns of your life, understand your past, so you can rise above it and access your potential. Because, and I think this is like a big part of being in toxic workspace environments is um, all it is you are choosing to betray yourself over and over again for this idea of success. And you have to really start to look at yourself and see what you need to let go of and what has really always worked for you that you need to lean into to really access that potential. And storytelling circles is a really great place for that, amongst many other wellness tools. But yes, that's what I do. And then before that, I was um, 14th employee at Snapchat. And while I was there, I created the Our Story product for them. And I also like ran women's initiatives, kind of built out the internal women's group for them. And yeah, I'm also very, very active in writing and creative writing and essay writing and fiction writing. And that's me.
And so before it was Soul Mindfulness, it was another app called Yoni. So
Yeah.
if anybody had been maybe following Yoni, this is the creator of Yoni as well.
Yes.
So you've been around the block for quite some time. And before you jumped on, I was reading an essay that you were writing about synchronicity, how you used to live in LA and you moved to New York. And so that was an interesting read. But so Chloe had kind of the right core language about rising above things. That's why I brought her on for this panel. And we've both worked in the corporate world. We know kind of how that is in comparison to what we both do now. And so let's go ahead and get started with some of these questions that I prepared. But this is new information that I was reading just the other day when I was preparing for this interview with Chloe. So what I found was that over 1 in 5 people, and it's really, to be exact, 22%. So just, I like numbers. I used to be, I'm a double accounting major. So 22% admitted that they either are or were in a toxic work environment. So that's kind of a lot of people, and I bet you not everybody has spoke up about their experience. Some people are still in their experience, need to remain quiet to keep their job, etc. So I bet you that percentage could increase. Um, Chloe, how does that make you feel? Just hearing that, you know, there are 22% of people that are admitting that they are a part of a toxic work environment. What's coming up for you?
I'm like surprised it's so low. I'm like, but I think it's it's so much more than the toxic work environment. It's so much more than these companies. And I really don't blame anyone, because it's a part of something bigger. It's a part of society. Like, I don't know about, like, first of all, I believe I created this for myself, like the toxicity, just like when I've also been in a toxic relationship. Like,
Hmm.
I allowed myself to be in that relationship. I continued the pattern by needing to people please, by wanting this idea of success, by like holding on when I needed to let go. And I think that a lot of these toxic work environment are built based on capitalism, and they're based on fear mentality, and they're based on this idea of like sheep, like I, whoever taught it to me, whether it was myself, it's this idea that like you got to fit in to succeed. And so when you get into these, a lot of that toxicity is this idea of having to adapt yourself. You have to fit in, you have to do what you're told in order to get that raise, in order to like go up the ladder.
Yeah.
When really, as souls and as like had like souls having this human experience, our point of being here is to be our truest form of self. And that's actually how we'll, we'll find our ultimate success. But that's really scary because no one teaches us to do that. In fact, it's actually the opposite is being taught to us. It's like, don't stand out, don't be your true self. Ooh, that's a little weird. Like, oh, what are you doing there? So I guess that's kind of like what comes up for me with that.
Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me of one of my favorite quotes about be you, everyone else is taken. And it's true because I mean, yeah, it's a shame that we are kind of pushed to conform. Why do you think that we're pushed to conform? Do you feel like it's so a select group of people can succeed, or do you feel like it's just a part of our education system? Um, do you think it's an American thing? Do you think it's a world thing?
I think it's a bit of a world thing from being in so many, so Soul or what was
Yeah,
Yoni. Well, we're across,
I love that we're you're
yeah,
gonna touch on this.
yeah, we're across 160 countries. So you are really sitting and telling stories with women around the world. And a lot of the beliefs I have, I've been able to ground into and say, oh wow, like I'm not alone in these feelings, in this like yearning to be yourself in a world that tells you not to be. I think culture to culture, that idea of conformity looks different. Like, as much as you know I think right now, especially like being a woman's really hard in America, and we're, our rights are being taken away from us. We still have it a lot better than a lot of these countries. Like some of these
Mhm.
stories I hear, I'm just like, okay, yeah, like I should be grateful, even though we've got a lot of work to do. Um, but yeah, I think it's the patriarchy. Like I think it's like, and again, I'm not saying men are bad because I think everyone is in this system. Like it's just the system at B, and this sense of power that is crumbling. Like I really
Mhm.
believe it's crumbling around us. And I think that these like, these Gen Zers question the system like way
Yeah.
more than we did. Like I was so like I just like kind of had this ingrained belief that those in power were better than me, were wiser than me, and they were right. I and I think that depends on where, like, my boyfriend's a person of color, grew up in Missouri. Like, he kind of like was more like the system is fucked up and like I'm always going to question it. But me as a white girl growing up in like a conservative, very competitive, like suburbs where like people were funneling into the Ivy Leagues. And it was like, I was just so ingrained, do not question the system. And maybe it was that I'm being white. And maybe it was that like, there is some sense that like it is helping white people and, and that it is all a part of this like underbelly of white supremacism as well. But yes, I was not taught to question the system, and I had to really let go of a lot of things to just be comfortable to speak up to people in power that were,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, we've already touched on this, and the question is, do you think toxic work environments are a result of capitalism or patriarchal thinking? Do you want to add anything to that question? I mean, anything that comes up. But I mean, I feel like we've heard your stance that you do believe it is that. Um, Anything you want to add on that?
I think just like within the patriarchal and capitalism, it's this idea of like, you know, the sheep mentality, the herd mentality, and kind of like falling in line. Like I do think that's a result of capitalism, of the patriarchy, of white supremacy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that's also a part of the people don't want to have the hard conversations. They don't want to be questioned. Um, and I think that is like also what's kind of happening in these environments that
Yeah,
are more challenging and are more
sure.
like asking you to betray yourself.
Okay. So I had Jessica Hickman on the last panel, and she is in charge of Bullyology, which is a company down in Australia, I believe. I'm pretty sure it's there. And she is the author of The Upstander Leader. And and I asked her the question, why do you think, toxic work environments happen, or people like me and you are targeted for workplace bullying? And she said it all comes back to power and control. Do you want to comment on that? Because it is a part, power and control, I think, is that is the essence of patriarchal thinking, which is basically like this group has more power, this group has more control, this group over here is weak. I'm able to enforce this power and control over this group. Um, Anything that you want to add to how you said that this system is actually crumbling, that this power and control is actually crumbling? Do you want to give an example? Do you want to give an example of maybe in the past when you have had this dynamic brought to you, this power and control brought to you, where you did maybe feel like you betrayed yourself? You don't need to name the company, you don't need to name the year or whatever, or just like touch on it briefly.
Yeah. No, like I think that I believe that who I was previously was like primed for a toxic work environment. And I also like, I don't even like the word toxic work environment in a way. Like I don't like labeling anything basically. But I think I was primed because I was set up with all I cared about was winning. I was an
Mm-hmm.
athlete. I was a college D1 athlete. Um, I went to a really competitive school, and it was all about winning. It was about getting good
Mm,
grades. It was about, like getting in the starting lineup, like
yeah.
working really hard to do those things. So like I think that I don't think that everyone that worked at the company I worked at would say, oh, it was a toxic environment. I also think there's a lot of people that, or maybe not a lot, because I think a lot of us were kind of in maybe this type of personality, but there easily could have been a lot of people where when certain leaders did certain things, they roll their eyes because they're not so primed to like that person's in power. I want to please them at all costs. I'm
Yeah.
ready to work until 12 a.m. in the office.
Right.
And like, at one point I fainted and like the security guard like found me on the floor. And it's like, because a lot of people would be like, fuck that. And I think
Yeah.
that's what I mean by like things crumbling is I think that like, I have definitely I'm in a hard financial position right now, as an entrepreneur. And so there's I've toyed around with like applying to tech jobs again, and
Okay.
I kind of like sort of I get scared and I talk to my boyfriend about it and he's like, one, you're not the same person you are, and two, people just don't work the way that like
Yeah.
we worked in that system. And I think there's like this interesting like dynamic of like I think the generation before us like worked hard, but because there was also this more focus on like having a family earlier in life, that led to I think a little bit more work-life balance, where I think that like our generation is having like if they are like a lot of people aren't having kids, and then if they are
Hmm.
having kids, they're like having it later, and so like you just like fill that time up with work, or it's easy to, because again you're just, or at least I was just chasing this idea of success. So like
Yeah.
I come back to this toxic work environment and being very far removed from it, to be clear, or this, what people might
Yeah.
call toxic work environment. And I'm like, I did it to myself. Like, who knows, who knows? I could have gotten fired if I like was like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not going to do these
Yeah.
things. Like, but maybe I wouldn't have. Like, maybe like people would have like reacted if I was
Yeah.
speaking up for myself and I was better at at presenting my ideas in a clear way and didn't back down at my first pushback. Because like I would be like, hey, I disagree with like this direction. But the second the people in power were like, what are you talking about? You're wrong. I'd be like, okay, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. And then like a few months later,
Yeah.
it's like, oh wait, I was right. But I think it takes a lot of this like unprogramming of yourself if you have been a
Hmm.
rule follower. I'm also like, I was like the biggest rule follower as a kid too. Like, you know what I mean? Like I was just like, I'm gonna get good grades. I'm gonna do what I'm told. I don't want to fail. I also
Yeah.
was like so scared of
Failing.
failing, but like shame is a
Sure.
emotion that like is quite uncomfortable, I think. And
Oh,
like
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like having it, like experiencing it at times as a little kid, I think it caused me to avoid it. But like all things, the
Mhm.
things that we run from, like we have to sit in eventually and be like, oh, actually, like I don't need to have shame in this moment. Like
Mm.
I can
Yeah.
just be myself. So
Have you ever read the book All About Love by Bell Hooks?
yes, yes, yes.
Okay, because you're like saying like so many things like that really are so embedded in that book, and I just finished it, and it's so good, and it's such an easy read, and it talks a lot about shame and like patriarchal thinking and materialism and winning and all that stuff. And you're coming at this panel from saying like maybe I attracted this toxic work environment. Maybe I was had that victim mentality. And I think it's really smart because, when I think about my toxic work environment situations, I mean, one is really sticking out in my head where there was a girl that I was working with, and it was funny. Like now it was funny, but back then it was not funny, where she like stood above me while I was sitting down, and she was just like, it's going to get a lot harder and a lot faster, so you better buckle up. And in that moment, I didn't say anything, but like now, like at like what I've learned, I wouldn't like let somebody talk to me that way. And I remember going to who was it? It was like a person that was helping me. She was like a mentor, but she was also like looking at my performance reviews, and she was like, she was a tennis player, she was an athlete. And I would love to know what sport you played. I just am curious. But she told me, she goes, why would you let people talk to you like that? And I was like, well, am I allowed to do that. And that was at KPMG, which I'm not shy to say the companies. And honestly, it's a shock that somebody at KPMG wanted to not conform, because that is a big conformity uh company. I mean, when I was there, that's how it was. I think COVID has changed the dynamic of how people operate. But yeah, I mean, like, that was an example of a woman leader being like, you don't need to take that and you can stand up for yourself. And if I were you, I would do that next time. So anyway, would like to know what sport you played.
Yeah, well, okay, I want to say a few things to that. One, I'm just like so happy that that happened and I like love that. Two, it's really interesting that she plays tennis because I had to quit tennis because I got, playing singles out there alone, I got way too in my head and
Mm.
I would break down on the tennis court. And I just had to kind of be in team sports. And I'm now getting back into tennis. And the main
Ooh.
reason is to build up my mental toughness and my own self-talk. And just like be able to kind of chill and flow when the pressure
Yeah.
is on me in that singles game. And the other thing that really struck me in that story is this sense of going faster. And I feel that that is something that also got ingrained in me. And as I've been in this just unraveling of self, looking at all my routines, looking at my self talk, there was this moment where I'm in the self checkout line at the grocery store. And in my head, I'm like, go faster, Chloe, go faster. And I'm like, dude, I had to stop. And I was like, no, you can go your own pace. You can go as slow as you want. But there was this little voice in my head being like, you're holding people up. If you move faster, the line's going to move faster. And I was like,
Yeah.
just chill out. And yeah, yeah, we just like learn these things and who knows, like, so I'm a big believer that our like soul came here with these lessons that we are meant to learn. We are meant to break these cycles that our soul has had many times. And so it's
Yes, I agree with that.
we're being put in these positions. So we actually just say, no,
Yeah.
I'm actually not gonna do this anymore.
Mhm.
Um, anyways, I played lacrosse, but I also
Okay.
so I played lacrosse in college, but in high school I played volleyball and lacrosse, and I was also a swimmer for many years.
Oh, me too.
Nice.
I would
Yeah,
have I would have guessed field hockey, but lacrosse,
it's
that's
similar.
really wow, like D1, that's amazing. But I think New York also, I mean, you lived in LA, so you know the difference, but I think New York pushes people to move fast at times, and I'm like, I don't need to do that. Like, I don't need to be rushing down the sidewalk, like, you know, I don't know. I think New York can like take a chill pill at times, but
I
okay.
I feel like it slowly is.
Yeah, I think so
I mean,
too.
I don't know. Maybe it's, you see what you want to see, but
Yes, you're
I go
right
to
about
the
that.
park. I see a lot of people chilling. I touch
I
trees every day. That's a big part of my mental health routine. I just like hold myself to a tree and I don't feel like everyone's like, huh, maybe I'll do that.
yeah, no, there are individuals in New York that are 100% doing that. I think it's more like when you go up to Midtown in the middle of the day, or like, 6th Avenue.
Yeah,
Um
that's true. I actually don't do that.
I used to
I
work over there. Oh my gosh.
I
Okay.
pretty much stay in the East Village and the Lower East Side. So
Okay, so we probably have worked our way towards this to this question. And if you want to add anything to this, but it sounds like your belief is that you kind of the answer to this question is just it's been ingrained in us. But the question is, what do you think leads to toxic work environments? So maybe it's this mentality of like, you need to make the grades, you need to win, you need to do this, you need to have this. Do you think, um I mean, like, for instance, like when you first get on a job in the beginning, it's so like, hey Chloe, like, welcome to the team, like, let us know if you need anything. And it's like all like the first 2 weeks, I feel like, on a job are like, oh my God, this is great. And you're like calling your friends or your loved ones, and you're like, yeah, I just love the people that I'm working with. And then then what happens is like, you know, that goes away. And then there's situations that come up. I guess like what I'm trying to ask is, why do you think in the beginning it's so hunky dory, and then like that shield goes away like after a certain amount of weeks? Why do you think the toxic work environment or the toxicity starts to creep into the work environment?
I I have not had that experience, so I like, can't speak to that at all.
Okay.
I feel I've only had one job really, and um I would say that there was a level of discomfort from the beginning for me, and there was a level of not fitting in and figuring out how to fit in to succeed and prove myself and prove my worth and make people believe that I'm worthy to be there and I'm smart. Um, and I had that from day one.
Okay. So day one, you were going in and you felt like the pressure to prove yourself. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. And
Okay.
again, like that might be the environment. I think, um I was one of the only women. I was definitely the only woman doing what I was doing. But again, it's me too. Like it was this sense of I was with mostly all engineers, all guys that went to the same college. And I didn't go to that college. And
Mhm.
I was what they call a fluffy, I think it's called a fuzz or something like that. But like I was, I didn't go to school for engineering. I was an engineer. I was a writer, and like I studied history, which is not, and I was with all these engineers that, were quite smart and felt they were very smart, and maybe at the time, looked a little bit down on the
on,
whatever
on the
creative,
fuzzy.
on the fuzzies. And all I wanted was to fit in and prove myself.
Mm,
That's on that's on me. And
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like I just like I'm like they were, and it's like when I look back on my life, I've been in that situation so many times. Um I think the only time that I haven't felt this like need to fit in and prove myself was in college, and I just got really lucky that the atmosphere I experienced in college was very much like be free, be your true version of self. And I was also very lucky that I went to college, and as a freshman I was, on a lacrosse team. I kind of got this like built-in community right away. And the unwritten rules of this community of women was very much like loyalty and supporting one another, even though we were really different. And so yeah, college is really the only place that and especially my senior year of college, that I just was me. But most of my life was me trying to fit in
Mm,
and prove myself as worthy to be wherever I was. And all those situations were like different from time to time. And obviously I had moments of like being my true self and being free. But yeah, I don't know. I'm probably not giving you the answers you want, because I look
oh,
back and like I did like I'm like, yeah, maybe like there could have been different
no.
things happening, but like I kind of did it to myself too. And I also do think that like, but I also feel like everyone in this company probably felt the same way I did, and
Yeah.
to some extent, but not because of anything, but because everyone was this like type A proof
Yeah.
self, like, how do I
100%.
succeed in the world? I'm a 22-year-old. I don't really understand the world or what success is outside of this dynamic of academics and maybe sports. But I don't think a lot of people at the company even played sports. And so it just like created that kind of atmosphere. And
Mm-hmm.
there's really no one to to
Yeah,
blame.
no, you're kind of
All
like
have to
all
make
signing
more.
up. Yeah, you're all kind of signing up for the same experience. Um, like for me, when I started, I felt like there was that grace period, and then I felt like it was like clockwork where it was almost like after the second week, we're like, okay, we're gonna take our masks off and we're gonna be the real versions of ourselves. And I think that the reason for that is that it's just a long history of people working the way that they have been working and trying to be polite, trying to put their best foot forward, but then just so many people operating like that that then it's like you're kind of thrown into the deep end and they're like, see if you can swim. And I don't even think it was personal. I think that at times it was just the pressure that everybody was feeling from all angles, you know, top to bottom. So I think this is going to be an interesting question. I think a lot of companies now, because of Gen Z, being very fearless and being like, I'm not going to work like this. A lot of companies have caught on that, like, okay, we're going to need to build a culture that respects our employees. So nowadays, I've noticed that companies are selling people on their culture or things that they're doing to like offset toxicity because I think that now people are understanding that the corporate world, like we've been discussing up until this point, you're kind of signing up to be in a competitive work environment. And it's not really somebody, it's not one person that's creating the toxicity. It's just the atmosphere that's been created to conform, to achieve, to be, to work X amount of hours to prove yourself. So, do you feel like that is going to combat like the years of being conditioned to work that way? Like, so like for instance, like some companies are offering yoga on site, or some people are really educating their employees on their employee assistance programs, which is free counseling, free therapy, all that stuff that's in a it's a part of like a package within the company. Maybe they're doing summer Fridays where they're allowing people to like get off early on Fridays. Maybe on Mondays they are saying from 9 to 12 no one can have meetings because we're starting to settle into the new week. uh there's a lot of different things. I mean, honestly, like I've heard that they're bringing astrologers on site to kind of help with team building activities to help people understand how people work in a group, work individually. Do you think that's going to help combat toxicity? Do you think that's a good start? What do you think? I'm curious.
Um, I think perhaps, but I think a lot about the idea of like changing the feng shui of the house rather than just bulldozing it down and completely like deconstructing and rebuilding. And
Mm-hmm.
so that I think the yoga and all that kind of can be the feng shui and not really what's needed. Um, I think that it's possible. I think that everyone needs to be able to slow down. And I think that it's really hard to slow down in a lot of these companies, whether if they're IPO, you're getting pushed by the markets. If
Mm-hmm.
they're back, like you're being pushed by the VCs that you took money
Yeah.
from. And, even for me, like, okay, so I'm I raise money. I'm in a point where, the way the economy is looking right now, I'm not going to be like, I'm not going to be able to raise money again. I don't want to raise money again. I am so in this system of self of how am I creating a small business so that I can work at my own pace? Because
Mm-hmm.
for me, I did exactly what I'm kind of saying. I left Snapchat. I became an entrepreneur. I told myself I was going to do it differently, and I really didn't. for a long time. I kind of did I moved the furniture around, and I did these kind of things that, hopefully were less toxic in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
but they still were not like in my total flow. They still had senses of me people pleasing, of me saying yes to what I want to say no, like choosing fear. So I think we have to just deconstruct the system. I think that I do think we're going to see more layoffs of these companies. So
Mm,
because I think there's going to be this shift towards efficiency and of, yeah, like of making money and actually like spending the money that you make, um,
mhm,
kind of thing. So, but I think I'm just like hopeful that people can slow down, because I think that this kind of like go, go, go attitude is the core of
uh-huh.
the toxicity and this feeling
Yeah.
like, oh, this isn't a healthy work-life balance. And that's what it is. It's just like,
Because
you
you're
need
on a
it
hamster
now.
wheel.
Yes, exactly. Like everything needs to be done now. And there's this like, really intense pressure to go faster, go faster. If you're not moving fast, you're going to fail. And like it is,
Mhm,
and those words have been told to me so many times, and not just like at work, like being an entrepreneur, like they are drilled into your head of like, go faster, go faster, go faster, go
mm,
faster. And it's like, okay, like how do we all just like give ourselves grace to really slow down so we can listen, so we can
mhm.
not waste time pushing people on that thing over there that maybe isn't the right idea, and we need to like take more time to like have these ideas, to plan
Yeah.
out, to kind of like just like I
Well,
don't know.
like well, like, it's so interesting because we talked about tennis. Like, let's take tennis, for instance. Like, tennis is a game where you had to think a lot, right? You had to be in your head. And I know some people that have played tennis, and they've explained to me that the best tennis they played was when they didn't get so in their head, where they were going faster and they were like reacting. So like if you were to just go faster in tennis, you might not necessarily play a better tennis game. So it's an example of like that's a sport where you can win, but you're winning strategically on how you're like playing the game, how you're moving on the court. Golf is another
And
sport.
it's like, I want to go back to this tennis. You win by being in your flow state, by connecting to yourself. But
Mm-hmm.
like that's it. And I think that's like for me what success is like, how am I staying in my flow state? How am I how do I constantly have direct access to myself and not let any and don't listen to other things. So if it's a nice day out and I want to be outside all day and go on a walk, I can go do that. And
Yeah,
I honestly don't have an answer of what that works in these like big corporate systems, because I'm just trying to
right.
figure out how to make it work as like an entrepreneur with no
Sure.
employees, and like kind of like trying to just like allow myself, like it was a really big deal the first time I let myself go to a 12 o'clock yoga, because I loved the instructor. I was like, you know what, Chloe, you deserve this. And it's like, oh my God, like it's a joke that I had to kind of like, and now I'm like, of course I'm going to go to 12 o'clock yoga. Like, what does any of this really matter as long
Mm,
as I'm, and the more I flow, the more my mental health is better, my physical
yeah,
space is better, like I'm happier. That means that my relationships are better with everyone, including the ones that used to be challenging. And
yeah. So so what I'm hearing is okay, so I think it's really interesting that you brought up how you went off on your own, you started your own company, and you were saying, I'm going to do it differently. But then you had a realization that you kind of were just moving around the furniture, the feng shui of the room. So to follow up to on the question about combating toxicity, you know, maybe the and I think maybe you answered it already, but is there a way to resolve it? Is it better to just bulldoze it down or walk away from it or start anew? And if you could rebuild the system, what would you envision that it would, how would it work? What would people be doing? What, like, differently versus now? It would be cool to hear what you would have to say.
I definitely don't have all the answers. I think if I were to go back in time to some of the more challenging moments that I experienced, um, I would just really let myself slow down and find my truth. And I would tell myself that my truth is more important than their truth or what people think of me. It's just
Hmm.
about me. And I don't know, like, could that kind of shift this feeling of toxicity? Because then, you start to kind of speak up more and maybe you're hurt. Because I think the issue with you know, you can speak up, but it doesn't mean that the person you're speaking to is like listening or really like
Yeah.
hearing what you have to say because they might not be ready to hear it, like feedback is you're not always ready for it, even if it's right,
Yeah.
but you don't really know how to handle it. So I think that I don't know, but I think that
That could
could
be a smart start.
yeah, I mean, I think it works in one-on-one relationships, like one-on-one
Hmm.
relationships when they're challenging, you're a lot of times you just have to kind of keep holding your ground and keep also being, I think the other thing is like I would tell anyone is like don't be scared to be fired because like that's what
Yes.
keeps you there, where if you're just like I'm gonna like speak my truth and if this doesn't work out, so what, I walk away, I
Yes.
something new. And I think having that mentality could really like help open up the people in this
Yeah.
system more, so you have these like really nice
Right.
relationships and then either you get fired or you walk away, but like either
Yes.
way you have to detach from this thing of I need this job, I have to have this
Hmm.
job, I can't be fired from this job, like all of these things you just like have to let that go and be like I trust the process.
Yeah. Like, yeah, I agree with you on that. Like, there's been many times where I have felt that way, but towards the end of my tenure in the corporate world, I had that attitude because I had taken so much crap at that point where it was physically manifesting in my body, showing me that, like, okay, like, what are we doing here? Are we just trying to make things so miserable? So, like, you want me to quit? And maybe that was the case, but I mean, like, I do believe that if you are not sleeping, if you are having something like where you're fainting or for me, I had shingles,
I had chest pains too. Like,
chest
and
pains.
I mean, I honestly had chest pains
You gotta
until
ask yourself, is this worth it? Is this worth it? Is this
yeah.
worth it? That's why, like, it's important when you are working these jobs that you're a little iffy on to pay yourself each paycheck to have a little bit in the bank just in case you do want to walk away. You need to like prepare for that. Um
I think that's also like something I would tell just like just always be saving. Like
yes.
like a little bit, like just keep saving so you can give yourself a moment to like whether it's between jobs, whether and not be freaking out that
Mhm.
you can't live your life all of a sudden. Like do not spend your whole paycheck. Like do anything that you can. And even if like it's really hard to do that, just always be saving.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true.
As
Okay.
someone who like has had to like really reel it back on like just spending money on food, I'm just like, okay,
I
please
know.
just
I know.
don't do this.
And honestly, like, also another tip that I would tell people, like, if you're going from corporate world to entrepreneurship or like you're in between two corporate jobs, don't turn your nose up against part-time work. Like if you need to go get a job that is like part-time where you're a waitress or you're a dog walker or you're doing this, it's better than nothing, and don't get so sucked up in the in how it looks,
Yes,
right?
I agree. I agree. But as someone who's like trying to do that, it's like it's so hard. Like it's
It
like
is.
like it's and so I hope to kind of pick up some freelance and consulting gigs,
Yeah.
and I'm keeping them forever. Like I'm like, even when I'm like quote like more financially stable, I'm like, I think we live in a world where it's really good to have multiple sources of income,
Mhm.
especially, a lot of people are not able to dream, especially when you're like living in certain like metropolitan areas. It's hard to even have a dream of like owning a home or a
Yeah.
house. And so I think like the only way to do that, or not the only way, like obviously some people have figured it out, but I think like getting multiple forms of income, picking things up, really saying like, everything like is worth my time. Um, and finding your way towards that. And I think if you're like really lucky, trying to like find things that don't feel like work too, that really excite you, even if they're not, even if you need other jobs as well.
So, two more questions. The first one is, do you feel like women are going, like if anyone were to change this dynamic, do you think women would be the group to do that, to change this conformity, this patriarchal thinking? Do you feel like it's already happening with the people that you've seen that are standing up against the dynamic? Uh, what do you think?
I don't think anything can happen like with just women. Like I think it always, any
Yeah,
form of change will take a
both.
lot of people coming together. I also don't think that these patriarchal systems like just hurt women. I
Agreed.
think they, like, from my point of view, I think they affect creatives, out of the box thinkers, essentially people that do not line up with this, like, because I've seen it not work for men too. I've seen men
Yeah,
cry
I agreed.
them, and they tend to be, a more creative, a more kind of like just different systems of thinking. So I think it really will take everyone kind of coming together, everyone bringing their own perspective to the table, because my experience is your experience. Like we just have one, and I think that we all have to come together for things to really start to change. I
Hmm.
think that it will take new companies and system, and it will take like new companies really succeeding and creating these systems for a bigger change to happen, because I do think it is so hard to slow down and deconstruct a system. Like if you're already like paying the bills, I think it's really hard to take a moment, pause,
Yeah,
deconstruct, and rebuild, because
yeah,
that is really terrifying for most people, and especially big companies. So
yeah.
they kind of are going to need a blueprint of successful, conscious companies.
Hmm.
And who knows what they look like?
I
Like,
know.
who knows if like a true conscious company can ever be a certain size, Like
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I'm in a standpoint where I'm like, I want a small team forever. I don't
I
want to be
agree
in a
with
big
that.
company. Like I just like I
Yeah.
want and I've also learned about myself, like I don't really like managing. I like being a captain. I like just like, like leading the way, but I am really lucky at this point to work with individuals that are also like self-starters and leaders. And it's just like, hey, I think we should do this thing. What do you think? What do you
Hmm.
their issues? And then it kind of like all happens. And like that's put me a lot at peace. And I had to kind of really I think you're told like be a manager, like be a leader, be
Yeah.
or not even a leader, like run the system, and I think that, you know, a version of me that was especially happening because of this system. I was a micromanager. And so
Mm,
like it's so important for me to like hire people that I don't have to micromanage like at all. Because
yeah.
I'm at such a deeper sense of peace. But I think in order for that to happen, like you need kind of like you just have smaller teams and
Yeah.
you're working efficiently and you're not trying to do a million things. You're just sort of at a steady pace that is, you're really thinking about what you're working on, why you're working on it. You're
Hmm.
not just working to work. Like even in my own day to day, I'm just like, do I really need to do this thing? Like sometimes I write out lists and I'm like, okay, I think I need to do that. And then a day later, I'm like, you know what? I don't want to push that forward. I don't have to do it. And I just like cross it off my list.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's like interesting what you said. Like, do I really need to do it? Because I think there's some companies that are really good at specific things, and then they're like, well, we also want to do this because it's trendy. And it's like, do you really need to do that? I feel like if people were to just kind of stay in their zone of genius and capitalism, I think really like kind of promotes that it's like, oh, well, they're making a lot of money in that, so we're going to do that too. And it's just like, why?
Um,
Um, okay, the last question is I know you did in-person women's circles in Los Angeles. Would you ever do them in New York? Are you ever thinking about maybe doing it again?
yeah. No, I've done a few in New York. Uh,
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, I think so. I'm pretty. Yes, I live in a very different apartment than I lived in LA. In LA, it was yeah, I mean I love my apartment. I'm very grateful, but it is, significantly smaller than my place was in LA. So I'm like I can't tell if people like coming here or they're just like, "Oh, why am I, here?" So sometimes I'm like, "Okay, should I like go and expand to a place?" But I don't know. I would like to get in a habit of doing it once a month.
Hmm.
So we'll see. Yeah, I think so.
Nice. Nice. Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom on everything. And I really liked your viewpoints and how you you kind of went at this at a in a different way. So I appreciate you for doing that and sharing everything that you shared today.
Yay. Thank you. And, we're all evolving our opinions. I think the more we listen to ourselves and like learn, and
Hmm.
that's part of this whole human life experience thing. So thank you so much for having me and thinking of me. And yeah.
Yes, yes. Best of luck with everything, and I hope to see you in New York in person.
Yeah, yeah. Let me know and I'll make sure you're on the next email blast.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thanks, Chloe. Have a good rest of the day.
All right, bye.
Bye.